All righty, it's that time. It is 5:03, so we will go ahead and get started. I will turn on my video. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Today, my name is Lori Prince, and I am the Director of Financial Aid here at the University of San Francisco. Very excited to welcome you today. This is our very first webinar for the 24-25 FAFSA application. I'm very excited to be able to bring you the information as we're getting it to help prepare current students, prospective students, and the USF community. We have about 268 participants, so that is quite exciting. If you have any questions, there will be a Q&A section. Please put your questions in the Q&A box. So there's a Q&A box on Zoom. You can put your questions in there, and I promise when I get to the end and we go over Q&A, I will answer as many questions as I can. Any questions that I'm unable to answer, I'm happy to follow up via email. So we will go ahead and get started. Again, Q&A section, and I will answer those questions when we get to the Q&A section. So to begin, this presentation is a 2024-25 FAFSA preparation presentation. We're going to cover the updates for the 24-25 FAFSA and how you can prepare. So I really try to ensure that this presentation would be useful for everyone. So we are solely covering the FAFSA application that is going to be coming out next month, and the updates and how you can prepare for that application release. Once the FAFSA is released, we will also be hosting events for the post-FAFSA release. And in that webinar, we're going to go over step-by-step instructions. We will have more like visual aids to help at that point because the application would have been released and we could test it. But at this point, I'm not able to provide that just yet, but other information to get you ready. What we will cover today. So today we're going to cover the Federal Student Aid FSA ID creation. We're going to cover the 24-25 FAFSA overview and changes. We're going to cover contributor information needed to complete the FAFSA, so gathering all those important documents, special and unusual circumstances, and then our question and answers. So again, Q&A section, and I will answer your questions during that time. So Federal Student Aid ID, the FSA ID, we're making this the first thing that we talk about because it is the most critical piece of completing your FAFSA application. You have to have an FSA ID. So what is a Federal Student Aid ID, FSA ID? It's an account, username, and password used to log into all federal student aid products, tools on studentaid.gov. So on studentaid.gov, that's where you complete your FAFSA form. There's also other tools that can help you as you're a student, and if you have student loans, there's like a loan simulator tool that can help you estimate what your monthly payments are going to be when you have completed your studies. So there's a lot of great products that Federal Student Aid offers to students, but to be able to use them and complete your FAFSA form, you have to create your Federal Student Aid ID, your FSA ID. What I'm going to do throughout this presentation, we have a few, they're very short clips from Federal Student Aid. They just released these, and I think it's really important to provide you information from the source. So I will be playing these little clips. So this first clip is going to go over create and access your studentaid.gov account.
The third stop in your financial aid journey is to create an FSA ID, which is a username and password that gives you access to your studentaid.gov account. It's important that you create your studentaid.gov account as soon as possible so that you have plenty of time to complete the free application for federal student aid or FAFSA form. Some things that you may be able to do with a studentaid.gov account include completing the FAFSA form online, signing your master promissory note to receive student loans, exploring repayment plans, and utilizing resources like loan counseling and the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Help Tool. To create a studentaid.gov account, you will need to enter your Social Security number. Note that, starting in the 2024-25 academic year, contributors who do not have a Social Security number can create a studentaid.gov account to fill out and sign the required section of the FAFSA form. However, as a student, be aware that you can't submit a FAFSA form for yourself or be eligible for federal student aid if you don't have a Social Security number, unless you are a citizen of one of the freely associated states. In addition to the student, each contributor must create their own studentaid.gov account and have their own verified email address associated with that account. Sharing accounts, even between family members, is never allowed. This means that if you're the parent of a dependent student, you will have to create your own account to sign your child's FAFSA form online. Once you've created your account, remember to avoid sharing your FSA ID with anyone, including your family members. Create your studentaid.gov account as soon as possible by visiting studentaid.gov/create-account and following the instructions on the page. It's important for you to remember your account credentials. Here are some common issues that users encounter with their studentaid.gov account and how you can solve them. If you forgot your password, select Forgot My Password and follow steps to reset it. If you forgot your username, you can log in using a verified mobile phone number or email address. If you can't use your verified mobile phone number or email address, select the Forgot My Username link on the login page and answer your challenge questions to retrieve it. If your account is locked, use your verified mobile phone, email, authenticator app, or challenge questions to unlock it. Follow the prompts, including providing your birth date, and create a new password. If you no longer have access to any two-step verification methods, use your backup code issued when you created your account. You now have all the information you need to create and retain access to your studentaid.gov account. To continue preparing for the FAFSA form, check out our next video in this playlist to learn what documents you'll need to gather. And remember, for additional information and answers to your questions, visit studentaid.gov.
All right, so we're gonna move along. There we go. So that short video talked about the FSA ID without an SSN. So this is something new. Before, parents who did not have a Social Security number, they were not able to apply for their FSA ID. So beginning in December 2023, parents will be able to get an FSA ID username and password without having an SSN to access and complete their sections of the 24-25 FAFSA form. It's important to note that it is not available right now. So again, starting in December 2023, and I wish I had an exact date to give you, but that has not been released yet from the Department of Education. So as we're getting updates, our team is updating the financial aid website. We have a section specifically for the FAFSA Simplification Act. As we get updates, we are posting on there, and then we email our current student body to let them know what the new changes are. So right now, this is going to happen in December sometime. Once we know, we will let you know, but this is exciting news because parents without a Social Security number are able to have an FSA ID. Another item regarding FSA ID without a Social Security number is on the 24-25 FAFSA form, if the parent is completing their own section and they do not have an SSN, the SSN will be blank and disabled. So they wouldn't be able to enter a value in there. If the parent has an individual taxpayer identification number, the ITIN, they should add it to the FAFSA form. If they don't have an ITIN, they should just leave that question blank. So again, as this phase opens and we get more information, we will be sure to relay that out. What if you forget your FSA ID? So on the video clip that we watched, they had they gave some tips that you could use the forget password or forget username. So to reset your password, you're going to need to have access to the verified email or verified phone number used when you were creating your FSA ID. So really important that you make note. So everyone who's getting their FSA ID, you want to make note, what verified email did you use? What verified phone number did you use? Because it's also important to note that the FSA ID will be used more than once. You have to renew your FAFSA every year. So everyone's going to need to have their FSA IDs ready to be able to utilize it when you're renewing your financial aid application. When you're completing your loan applications, if you borrow loans while you're in school, you're going to need the FSA ID. So really important that you're, saving that information somewhere. So how are you ensuring that you have access to this information in the future? So an example could be maybe you're using a password manager to be able to house that FSA ID, the verified email, and the verified phone number we use. I know sometimes people change emails or they change phone numbers. So it's something important to keep in mind. I do foresee this possibly being an issue. So just want to forewarn early on that you want to make sure that you are securing that information somewhere safe so you're able to access it when needed again. So 24-25 FAFSA, what is changing? So now that we've covered your FSA ID and the importance of the FSA ID, we want to talk about what's changed. If you have never filed a FAFSA before, if you're a parent and this is your first time going through the FAFSA application process, really nothing is going to seem new to you, right? This is the first time you are completing it and it's all you know. But those of us who have filed a FAFSA before, if you're a current student, you are noticing some changes. The biggest change is the FAFSA is not being released until December 31st. Why is that significant? Because every year prior, it has been released October 1st. So we're seeing almost 3 months of the delayed application, and it's delayed because the application is being streamlined. It's being streamlined to expand eligibility and to make the application process easier for students and families. So if you have filed before, here are some questions that you will no longer see on the application. Number one is we're going to see a reduced number of questions. So that's good news. We're going from 108 to 46. Another good thing is, students can add up to 20 colleges now on the FAFSA form. They were limited to the number of colleges they could add. Now they can add 20. The questions you're going to see that are removed is the federal work-study interest. So you will no longer have to indicate if you're interested in federal work-study. The financial aid office is able to determine if you meet the eligibility. So that question just isn't needed anymore. A college degree or certificate that you are pursuing, again, that's not needed because the college has that information. Student housing choice, we are going to use a different means of collecting that information. Driver's license, that's not needed to determine federal aid eligibility. And then parents' highest educational level, again, not needed to determine federal aid eligibility. Next up, there is the parent and contributor process. So we're going to discuss more about what is a contributor and what this process looks like, but this is something new for the FAFSA application. Student and contributors provide consent and approval to transfer federal tax information. Federal student aid ID is required for students and contributors. So we'll talk more about contributors, but the federal student aid ID is not just for the student. So it's the student and the contributor. Student aid index replaces the EFC. So if you have filed a FAFSA before, this is a change you're going to see. When you complete the FAFSA application, at the end, you used to receive something called an expected family contribution number, the EFC. Now it's been changed with the student aid index. It serves the same purpose. It's going to help the financial aid offices determine what type of need-based financial aid the family qualifies for. Just change the terminology. So now we're using the student aid index. And because we're changing terminology, it also changes how we talk about calculating need. So when we're talking about calculating need, what that means is we are determining how much need-based aid a student qualifies for. So how we are going to come up with that calculation, we're going to look at the cost of attendance. So that's posted on every university's website, cost of attendance to attend that university for that academic period, minus the student aid index, minus other financial assistance. Other financial assistance could be like private scholarships. So we would subtract any other financial assistance, and then that tells us what the financial need is. So when we're looking at other need-based financial aid and determining what need-based aid that family or student can qualify for, we're going to be looking at that need portion. What is still needed for that family? Okay, so another short video. We're going to go ahead and play this now.
Hi, I'm Taylor, a guidance counselor here to answer your questions and help you on your financial aid journey. Wondering what's changed for the 2024-25 FAFSA form? There are 6 key changes coming to the FAFSA form and experience for 2024-25. 1. A spouse or step-parent may need to participate in your FAFSA form as a contributor. Contributor is a new term being introduced for the 2024-25 FAFSA form, and we'll go into more detail on what that means in our Who is a Contributor on the 2024-25 FAFSA form video. 2. Your federal tax information will now be transferred directly from the IRS into the form. This information will be used to determine your eligibility for federal student aid and shared with schools and state higher education agencies to prepare financial aid offers. 3. For this transfer to happen, you and your contributors must provide consent and approval on the FAFSA form. This is a new requirement, and if consent and approval aren't provided, you will not be eligible for federal student aid. Even if one of your contributors doesn't have a Social Security number, didn't file taxes, or filed taxes outside of the U.S., consent and approval are still required. 4. You and your contributors will each need to have your own studentaid.gov account username and password to access and complete the online FAFSA form. Contributors who don't have a Social Security number can still create a studentaid.gov account to fill out their sections on the FAFSA form. But remember, you must be a U.S. citizen or eligible non-citizen to be eligible for federal student aid. 5. Once your FAFSA form has been started, you will now be able to view the status, including contributor progress, in your studentaid.gov account. Finally, when you complete the online FAFSA form, your information can now be sent to more schools, with the option to select up to 20 colleges, career schools, or trade schools. If you have more questions about the FAFSA process, visit studentaid.gov.
I'm a huge fan of these videos. I really appreciate that the Department of Education took time to, redo the presentations and the visuals that they provide to students and families. I think they did a really excellent job with these instructional videos. We're going to go ahead and move on to what is a contributor. So a contributor refers to anyone who is required to provide information on the FAFSA. The answers to the FAFSA will determine which contributor will be required to provide their information and consent. What does that mean? When the FAFSA application form is started, it can be started from a student or a contributor. When you answer the set of questions, it will then create an invitation to invite who are the required contributors. So if it's the student and they're a dependent student, it would require that the parents are contributors. So then the parents receive an invitation to then become a contributor on that FAFSA application. If we have an independent student who is married, then their spouse is going to be invited to be a contributor on the FAFSA application. Who is a contributor? So going into a little bit more detail on that, an individual required to provide consent and approval for federal tax information, FTI, along with their signature on the FAFSA form, including the student, and based on their dependency status, the following individuals. So if we're looking at dependent students, that could be the biological or adoptive parent, or the parent's spouse, step parent. For an independent student, it could be the student's spouse. Information required to complete the 24-25 FAFSA. So now we're going to talk about all the information that you're going to need to prepare to complete the FAFSA application. So important, we've already talked about this, but all required contributors will need an FSA ID. So that's why it was the first thing we talked about, because it's the first thing you need to do. If you already have an FSA ID, wonderful. If you don't, or if one of your contributors do not, you want to get ahead of that and apply for it. If you do not have an SSN and you're a parent, more to come in December when that process is going to become available. So FAFSA form contributors. Now here's the video on the FAFSA form contributors, how to understand and prepare FAFSA form contributors.
The second stop in your financial aid journey is to familiarize yourself with contributors. Contributor is a new term being introduced on the 2024-25 free application for federal student aid, or FAFSA form. Learn what is expected of a contributor and how you can prepare your contributors to participate in filling out your FAFSA form. A contributor is anyone who is required to provide consent and approval to have their federal tax information transferred directly from the IRS into the FAFSA form and a signature on the form. You, the student, are considered a contributor. Other contributors may include your spouse, your biological or adoptive parent, or your parent's spouse, a step-parent. If your family member is identified as a contributor, it does not mean that they have an obligation to pay for your education. Whether someone other than you is determined to be a contributor is based on your dependency status, your marital status, and the way you file your taxes. When you fill out your FAFSA form, you'll be asked to provide your contributor's information so that they can complete their required sections in your form. You'll need to ask for your contributor's full name, their social security number, if they have one, their date of birth, and their email address. You will then be able to invite them to your FAFSA form so that they can complete their required sections. Once invited, contributors will receive an email with a link that they can use to access your FAFSA form and provide the required information. Important tip: each contributor is required to have their own studentaid.gov account, so make sure you and your contributors have each created your own account before starting the FAFSA form. Consent and approval to have federal tax information transferred directly from the IRS into the FAFSA form are also required for all contributors. If consent and approval are not provided, you will not be eligible for federal student aid. Have conversations with family members who may be identified as a contributor to make sure they understand their role and to avoid any issues when completing your FAFSA form. To continue preparing for the FAFSA form, check out our next video in this playlist to learn how to set up your studentaid.gov account. And remember, for additional information and answers to your questions, visit studentaid.gov.
Okay, we're going to move on. There we go. So moving along to gathering the documents needed to apply. So the FAFSA questions ask information about you, the student. So it wants to know your name, date of birth, address, etc., and about your financial situation. Depending on your circumstances, for instance, whether you are a US citizen or what tax form you use, you might need the following information or documents as you fill out the FAFSA application. So I'm just going to go over some common documents that you would need, what tax year the FAFSA is going to be looking at. So that way, if you need to get any of your documents in order, or if you have for some reason not filed, you're able to prepare so that way there aren't any issues when completing the application. So number one, social security number for the student. It's important that you enter it correctly on the FAFSA form. So this is a very common problem we see where the incorrect social is entered for either the student or the parent for a dependent student. So you want to ensure that you are putting in the social security number correctly, that there's no issues, or else we could have a mismatch file on the financial aids end, and then there's just some corrections that have to be done. So that could just delay the process. And with the FAFSA already being delayed, we want to prepare you as much as possible so it's a very smooth process. And then if you have an alien registration number, if you are not a U.S. citizen, you would need that to complete the FAFSA application. The tax information that the FAFSA is looking for is for the tax year of 2022. So hopefully everyone has their taxes filed for 2022. And then we have some examples of the different tax forms that might be required. Perhaps W-2 information, if you have the 1040, foreign taxes. So we have a list here, but you'll want to gather all of your tax information for the 2022 calendar year. Get those documents prepared and ready because you will need them to complete the application. Moving on, you also need to have records of your untaxed income. So this would be interest income, veterans non-education benefits for you and for your parents if you're a dependent student. Also, asset information. So this would be child support received, cash savings, checking account balances, investments, including stocks and bonds and real estate, but not including the home which you live in. So this would be like rental property. And business and farm assets for you and your parents if you are a dependent student. So when the government is requesting asset information, you'll see that there is a prompt that'll say, as of today. So it's as of today, what is that asset value? And those are the numbers that you would then provide. One thing to note is child support received will be reported as an asset instead of income in prior years. So if you are renewing an application and receive child support, this is going to be another change that you'll be having in this new application. Next item is the 45-day deadline to complete the FAFSA. So this is really critical. Once someone starts the FAFSA application, you only have 45 days to complete the FAFSA. So that means all the contributors have completed all of their portions. That's the only way a FAFSA form is considered complete. Every contributor has to complete their portion. If someone does not complete their portion, it is not a complete application. And after 45 days, that the application will be deleted from the system. So what does that mean? That means you have to start the process from square one. Very important that before you begin, you're getting all of your contributors on the same page. That way it should be, very timely. The the application starts, and then the contributors are adding in their portions. If it's not a perfect sync within 45 days, unfortunately, the application does get deleted and you're going to have to start the process again. So I really wanted to plug that. Really important to know that there's a 45 deadline to complete the FAFSA once it is started. There is a federal deadline, so it's whichever comes first, the 45 days or the federal deadline, but you don't need to worry about the federal deadline. Right now, the FAFSA is just starting, so we're nowhere near the federal deadline. Now I want to talk about some special and unusual circumstances. So we normally identify these cases as financial aid appeals. So I want to talk a little bit about that because you might find that you fit one of these scenarios. And if that's the case, while you're preparing your items to complete the FAFSA, it's also a good idea to start preparing the documents for any financial aid appeals that you might be submitting. So we're going to just talk about some scenarios, and if anything stands out as something that might apply to you, I would hang on so you can hear about the special and unusual circumstances. So there's parent or spouse death, unusual uncovered medical or dental expenses. This is uncovered, so the insurance did not cover it. Loss of employment or income, extraordinary dependent care, divorce, secondary school tuition, additional family members in college. So we're going to jump into special circumstances. So if you are a current student or a prospective student, there's a QR code on the lower right-hand side that will take you to our appeals webpage where you can get very specific information regarding the different appeals that we have here at USF and understanding your right to appeal if you meet one of these conditions. This is the most common, special circumstances is the most common type of financial aid adjustment. You may be eligible for a special circumstance request if you or your family has experienced a significant change in income or employment. So this is, a change in the family's financial situation. So some of the examples, the main financial contributor has died, the parents have divorced, you've incurred extraordinary medical bills, you've received a one-time non-reoccurring type of income that was reflected on your FAFSA. So if you believe that you may, fall into this category, one thing that's important to note is when you're submitting an appeal, you have to submit supporting documentation. So you're going to want to gather the supporting documentation. If parents are divorced, we would need the documentation of the divorce decree. If someone has passed away, we would then need the death certificate. If it's the medical bills, we'll have to show that it was the out-of-pocket and showing that you had made those payments. If it was the one-time non-reoccurring type of income, we would need to see what that was and how it's one time. So very specific. Anytime we do a financial aid appeal, we have to have supporting documentation. Appeals are not automatically considered approved because maybe there was a change in the family's financial situation, but not always does that change the financial aid package because we're looking at that calculating need formula, and it really depends, if there is a remaining need. And at USF, we do not cover full need. So that's one important thing to note as well. We're going to move on to unusual circumstances because this is really important. This is the other type of appeal that students can appeal for. So these are conditions that justify a financial aid administrator to make an adjustment to the student's dependency status, commonly referred to as the dependency override based on an unusual situation. So unusual means it's not common, right? So this would be a student that would be eligible, is experiencing extenuating circumstances like homelessness, incarceration of parents, an abusive family environment, parent abandonment, and more, because students can find themselves in many other situations. So if a student believes that they may have an unusual circumstance, it's really important that after they file their FAFSA application, that they be prepared to have documentation for the financial aid office. So we would need, letters of support, if there's any court or police reports, supporting documentation for the appeal. If you are a continuing student and we have already processed a dependency appeal for you, there's going to be no other updates. We already have the information that we need. Okay, so now is the fun part. We get to see what types of questions you all have. So I'm going to go ahead and open up